This one is from Andy. Thank you very much. And writes, if the Olympians have access to the Akashic records, how could a rebellion against them ever succeed? Will the trickster help hinder the rebellion? And this follows Cerulean Valley. Thank you very much for the super chat. Why on earth do you think the Nordics haven't considered all your ideas and deemed them to be a failure? So yeah, two similar super chats where obviously the Olympians and the Nordics and the Archons are all the same.
Yeah, I get these questions from time to time, which have baked into them the completely false presupposition that who I've referred to as Olympians or Nordic overlords or whatever are some kind of omnipotent class of archons. Look, even if you take these myths literally, and in many cases I'm using them the way that Plato used mythology, but if you take these myths literally, there's always a class of Titans or Asuras who are opposed to the Olympians or to the Devas, right? There are two different groups that are struggling with one another. In the Abrahamic context, it's the angels of the Lord and the fallen angels who are led by Lucifer or Satan, right? And which we see in Genesis 6, which you know is a censored version of what's preserved in the book of Enoch, where we have the rebellion of the angels who came down from heaven and started teaching humans all of the secret arts, and sciences of the Elohim in order to lift up humanity so that we would not have to be subservient to this divine hierarchy any longer. And that's a direct correlate of the myth of Prometheus and the rise of the civilization of Atlantis in rebellion against Olympus. So there was this huge planetary rebellion before against this Olympian Deva control system. And there's this whole other faction, the Asuras or the Titans, which is not to say that in Prometheism, I'm advocating, Ashura worship, that we ought to entreat these Titans to come, and that, we either ask them to fight on our behalf or we are recruited into their millennial struggle against the Olympians. That's not what I'm saying at all. And the symbol of Prometheus has greater sophistication and ambiguity than that, because remember, Prometheus actually betrayed the Titans. Prometheus is a Titan who betrayed the Titans to bring Zeus to power and then turned on Zeus for the sake of humanity. So Prometheus is a much more complex trickster figure than to simply be aligned with Titans against Olympians. That having been said, my basic point is this to people who ask these kinds of questions. There is no class of all-powerful controllers in the world. Going back to what I was saying about Nietzsche and the will to power and perspectivism, the cosmos simply doesn't work that way. There's a power struggle. There's another side. And then we're here in between, and ultimately we should be the ones to decide our own destiny. In terms of the Akashic record, I don't see why knowledge of the Akashic record would somehow decide an Olympian victory over us or over Asuras or anything. The Akashic record is a concept for basically an etheric information data bank and a data storage of all past events in a kind of energetic medium that's been called the ether. That's the Akashic record idea. And this is not something particularly, it's not some fanciful or bizarre notion. Remote viewers access the Akashic record all the time. Every time there's a remote viewing session where one or another intelligence agency wants the viewers not to see something clairvoyantly in the present, not to spy on like some secret installation in another country in the present, but they want to go back and look at an event that transpired in the past and figure out, let's say, who was responsible for a certain terrorist attack. Like, for example, the Lockerbie bombing over Scotland, the Pan Am Lockerbie bombing. They remote viewed that. They didn't know how that explosion actually took place and who was responsible for the primary explosive, and they used remote viewing to go into the Akashic record and retrieve that information. Well, that's very useful, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be decisive in the context of a battle for the future. Even if you remote view the future, forget the past, Akashic record. If you remote view the future, all you're getting are probable futures. And this is at the core of my work, right? This notion of how the cosmos is structured such that we do have some degree of free will and personal agency. Remote viewers have tested this. They have remote viewed futures, seen events that are, to say the least, undesirable, and they have stopped those things from happening. Like, for example, shortly after 9/11, I believe Lynn Buchanan was already predominant. I think he was pretty much in retirement at that point, but it was an exceptional circumstance. So they came to Lynn Buchanan and they said, we need you to see the next 9/11. What's going to be the next major terrorist attack like this on the United States? And he took a team of people, himself included, and they did this. They saw that, I forget what year exactly it was. I think it was during the Bush-Cheney administration, or as I often like to call it, the Cheney administration. And
for sure.
And I think what they saw, a group of Islamic terrorists on boats inbound toward, I think it was the Carolinas coastline. It was somewhere between like Virginia and the Carolinas. And they were inbound with boats full of biological weapons. And they were going to release biological agents as soon as they got to the coast of the United States, which would have killed tens of thousands of people, at least.
Whoa.
Would have been much worse than 9/11. And this team of remote viewers was able to give the date down to the time of day that these boats were going to be inbound toward the coast. And guess what? The Coast Guard went out and intercepted them together with counterterrorism forces. They were there.
I didn't know that.
They were there and they stopped them. So, and there are many such examples. When you remote view the future, it's only a probabilistic future. It's more accurate when it's a forecasting of what they call a natural catastrophe. Although these days it's becoming increasingly unclear what's a natural catastrophe versus what's the use of a weather weapon or a tectonic weapon or some such thing. Yeah. But look, if let's say, they talk about Yellowstone exploding again in the future. That's a geological event. You might be able to accurately predict that using remote viewing when it is that Yellowstone's going to explode. And by the way, it might be a good idea to do that. And if we need to, think about maybe not building more cities within a certain radius around that. Yeah. But geological events, sure. Events that involve human beings and societies, you never have a perfectly accurate, reliable remote viewing of them precognitively. You only get a probabilistic vision of a future, which you can use your own initiative to change. So that's actually empirical evidence in favor of our having free will.
Well said indeed. Yeah. And as I keep telling people who are whatever, red-pilled or realize that science points to a more mystical world, or if you're in the cult, it's like, don't fall into the trap of linear time, which is people still find it, again, cause, effect. I mean, even in your novels, Jason, there are many timelines with Dana and you, and the Nordics are here. And it's very intricate, but it's both scientific and it's probably true.
Well, I get into this again in the last chapter of Philosophy of the Future, where basically I allude to, and this has to do with this. I hesitate to call her even a woman on the cover. This goddess, Titaness, whatever, super intelligence that's depicted on the cover of the book. In the last chapter of Philosophy of the Future, the one on Aerosophia, the one that recaps my idea of Aerosophia, I get into this idea that there is a kind of super intelligent hyper object in the future that has been affecting all of human history. So that time doesn't only flow forwards. There are phenomena that can shape history going backwards from the future into the past.
That's what Philip K. Dick wrote. He said Simon Magus and all these people were actually moving. Right. So that's how it seems they can see the future.
A future, though, that's always being rewritten.